when storms in life hit us, and they can be physical storms like I went through on that airplane, they can probably be more metaphorical storms, what we're going through, losing jobs, having a terrible diagnosis, having a family member be caught up in addictions, whatever the storm is in your life, we often call out to Jesus. We call out to God and we say, where are you in this? And that's what God is looking for. He's looking for us to authentically engage with him in the middle of that storm. Because God is revealed in the storm. So let's look at what's happening with Jesus and his 12 disciples today in Mark chapter 4. Read along with me. That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side." They were at a lake. So leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. And there were other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drowned?" So he got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the waves died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you guys so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who the heck is this?" Or "Who is this?" And even the wind and the waves obey him. This guy can control the weather. Who is this? So the disciples are in the middle of this storm, and it's like me on that airplane. They're getting tossed about. Water is coming over the sides of the boat, into the boat. It's chaos. It's loud. And Jesus isn't waking up or doing anything. And I feel like oftentimes when we're in the middle of a storm, metaphorically, physically, we cry out to God for help. But the storm continues. It keeps getting worse. Things aren't changing. Nothing's happening. So we cry out again and again. Maybe we pray a little harder, or we get more people to pray. Things are getting really bad. But we can't see God doing anything to stop it. And it is natural to wonder, do you care? And that's the accusations that the disciples give to Jesus in this story. They say, "Do you care that we're about to drown?" And I feel like many times when we are in a storm, we feel the same way. We feel like we have to wake God up to get a response out of him, to get him to do something different. But sometimes God deliberately chooses not to respond. An example of this is when Mary and Martha, Jesus' dear friends, sent word to him that their brother, Lazarus, was about to die, sick unto death. And they said, "Come and heal him before he dies." John 11, Jesus deliberately waited until he died before he did what they asked. Sometimes God chooses not to respond. Storms in life are confusing and hard, and when God seems to be unresponsive, he's not acting, he's not doing anything, what's going on, it feels really painful. And I think that Jesus understood this emotional pain. He sees that emotional pain. He's felt that emotional pain. When Martha, back to Martha, his good friend, when she was hosting a huge dinner party for he and his disciples, she was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. And she came to him and said, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the work?" And Jesus doesn't condemn that question here or in the boat with the disciples. In fact, he notices what Martha's going through. He says, "Martha, I can see you're worried and upset." He names that emotions. He doesn't condemn it. Jesus doesn't condemn the question, "Don't you care?" because he felt it. When he hung on the cross, some of his final words were, my God, why have you forsaken me? Where are you? Why aren't you responding? Where did you go? Are you sleeping? Don't you care?" So when we ask the question, God, don't you care? Jesus, don't you care? It shows that we believe that God is actually acting contrary to the way he should be acting. Because we believe God cares and we don't see any evidence. Lord, where is it? We believe that God is there, that God is listening, that God could do something in this situation, but he's deliberately choosing not to. And we think, don't you care? That's the seed of belief that we think, you know what? I actually think you do care. So what's going on? Jesus understands what it feels like to not have God respond to him. He knows what it feels like to think that God has abandoned us. And the heart of Jesus' story is not that we won't face storms or crosses or death, but that there is life after death. There is newness and restoration after the storm. It may feel like God's abandoned us. He's not working. But God's inaction on the cross, leaving Jesus there to die, his inaction on the cross became the method for the greatest action in all of time and space, the resurrection of the dead body of Jesus. And that's the good news. That's the heart of Jesus' teaching. That is the invitation to this table. When you say, I believe that it's not that God necessarily saves me out of the storm, but that he brings new life after. That's coming to the table and engaging with the person of Jesus. Storms and the struggle of God's inaction forces us to see God in a new way. Now, in 1986, an archaeologist dug up a picture of the boat. So we've got the disciples who are struggling against the storm in the boat. And I wanted to give you an idea of what that boat might have looked like. So they found this boat at the bottom of the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus and his disciples were in the story, buried in the mud, and they dated it to the year 50 AD. So this is indicative of the size and kind of boat these men would have been on. Can you imagine 13 people in that boat? It looks pretty small. So we've got Jesus sleeping in this boat, in the stern, and it's not like a big boat where he's down in his own bedroom taking a nap. He's there with them. And the disciples know that he could do something about what's happening. They're about to drown. Maybe they were bailing water. You know, they're shouting. The waves are loud, or the wind is loud. And he's not waking up. So they know he could do something, so he must not care. So that's what they accuse him of. But what if Jesus wasn't choosing to be inactive in this case? What if he was simply exhausted and he was in a dead sleep? Now, Psalms 121 says that the God of Israel, he who watches over Israel, that's God, neither slumbers nor sleep. God's never asleep on the job. That is, until God became a human. And the Bible always presents Jesus as the Son of God who had human needs. He was a man. He was hungry. He was tempted. He didn't give in to the temptation, but he sure felt it. He was tempted. And he was tired. And if you remember the day that Jesus had, just to set the story in context, he had spent the entire day at the lake. You know how tiring that is. And on top of it, he was standing in the boat offshore yelling to thousands of people his lessons. Now, I just do this for 2 hours on Sunday morning and I go home and nap for 5 hours. I'm exhausted. I can't imagine how tired he must have felt. So when he gets in this boat at evening time, he is exhausted. And through all this chaos, Jesus sleeps through the wind, through the waves, through the water, through getting wet. It's not until his friends start yelling at him and shaking him, Jesus, wake up, don't you care? Now, when I'm awoken up from a dead sleep, I don't know if you're like me, but it takes a minute for my brain to catch up with my body, or my body to catch up with my brain, whichever it is. I remember when I was a teenager, I fell asleep with my arm over my head like this, and it was such a weird experience. I remember it. And my parents were out of town, and so I'm sound asleep, and I hear this ring, one of those old rotary phones. And so I went, and I was like, oh, I have to answer that. My parents are gone. And I went to grab it, but my arm wouldn't go that direction, and I couldn't figure out where I was and who I was and what my name was. But finally, I was like, Oh, okay, I know what I'm doing. And then I use the other hand to pick up the phone and answer it. It took a minute. So Jesus gets jerked out of sleep in this chaotic situation to the waves splashing, the boat tumbling and jumping, and friends shouting at him. And he's awoken, and before he could put his usual strength, restraint on his immense power that he has, he spoke, "Quiet, calm down." And I wonder if this miracle is just a startle response to being woken up from a dead sleep. Did he really mean to make everything go dead calm? Because one second there's chaos, the next dripping, quiet. And I imagine a bit of a sleepy, sheepish grin when Jesus says, "Guys, why are you acting like scaredy cats? Do you still not trust me?" Did he mean to make everything go perfectly still, or did power slip out of him and that perfectly normal human sleep confusion? Either way, doesn't matter, but either way, now the disciples are really terrified. Or in the King's English, the King James Version, if you like that, they are sore afraid. Or in the Greek, it says, fearing they feared greatly. Their fear goes from cowardice, being little scaredy cats, to full-fledged terror when they realized they were in the presence of the greatest power in the universe. The only person who can control the weather is God. And they realize Jesus is God. In calming the wind and the waves, the presence of God is revealed to his followers. They realize he's more than a prophet. They realize he's more than a miracle worker. He's more than just a good teacher. They literally ask, what kind of human is this? So why follow Jesus? Why believe in Jesus? Why accept the invitation to this table of faith? Because Jesus is God. And the lesson in this is that this storm revealed that God was in the boat in the middle of the storm with those disciples all along. Storms in our life reveal God to us.